I bet you're wondering what this strange wooden gadget is. There are actually a lot of folks who make this thing a necessary part of their musical performances. It's called a capo. This particular capo is designed specifically for the Appalachian Mountain Dulcimer. Using a capo allows the player to raise the pitch of the strings, making it possible to play in different keys without having to retune their instrument. I've been making and selling these for many years, refining the design through experience and feedback from other dulcimer players. In this video, I will walk you through the complete process, from selecting and preparing raw wood to shaping, assembling, and finishing the final product. Along the way, you will see me use a wide range of shop tools, from traditional hand tools to computer-operated machinery. I combine time-tested woodworking methods with techniques I've developed myself over the years, adapting and improving the process to create a capo that is precise, durable, and visually appealing. Whether you're a dulcimer player curious about the craft behind your instrument's accessories, a small-scale woodworker interested in practical shop techniques, or simply someone who enjoys watching raw materials transformed into something purposeful and beautiful, I'm confident you'll find this video both interesting and informative. I start with some slabs of very thin wood. I have slabs of rock maple, which are 1/8 of an inch thick, and slabs of black walnut, which are about 5/16. I set up my clamping jig a little bit off of the table so I can get the clamps under it. These slabs are going to be glued together or laminated using aliphatic resin glue. Starting with the first slab, I pour a good amount of glue onto it. Up until recently, I would mill this wood myself by resawing and planing these slabs, but recently I've been ordering this from a mill company. Then I spread it evenly using a plastic gift card, which works pretty well for spreading glue. And start stacking these slabs on the jig. I then pour a layer of glue on the walnut. I then proceed to take another slab of maple and put it on top of the walnut, effectively sandwiching the walnut in between two slabs. After that, I stack another slab of maple on top of the first one without applying any glue, because this is going to be a whole separate board, and repeat the same procedure. And since this is a separate board, I don't want to get any glue in between the top layer of maple and the bottom layer of the second slab, so sometimes I like to put some paper there to make sure that they don't stick together. With this lamination system, I'm capable of producing 3 boards of laminated maple and walnut for the project. So here I'm repeating the same steps for the first 2 boards on a third one. Now watch what I do here. If I have a good amount of glue on one of the boards, I can set another board on top of it and then pick up the glue on the back side of the board. This saves me a whole step, and it conserves on glue that would otherwise be squished out and onto the table. You can see how I picked up enough glue on the back side of the board to have enough for the whole side. Now it's always essential that these boards are stacked evenly on top of each other, or else you're going to waste a lot of wood. After I glued and stacked all the boards, then I take a block of wood and put it over the top. I'm always checking to see if the boards are stacked evenly and they haven't slid with the glue. This usually happens the most when you start applying the clamps. So I have to tighten the clamp very slowly and keep checking for the wood sliding. I start by putting a clamp at each end so that I can adjust the boards as I tighten the clamps. As with many wood gluing operations, the pieces tend to slide if there's glue in between them. Once I have the two clamps placed slightly at each end, I'll put one in the middle and put some light pressure on it also. Now I can apply some more clamps going from the middle out, putting light pressure on those also. As you can see, I have to make adjustments very often. The optimum clamp pressure extends at a 45-degree angle from the foot of the clamps. With that in mind, I space the clamps accordingly to get the maximum even pressure on the boards. Now with the few clamps in the middle and two on the end, I can make a final adjustment on the slipping boards. Once the boards are satisfactorily lined up, then I can start applying some serious pressure on these clamps. From that point, the slipping is going to stop. Then I can put the rest of the clamps onto the jig. Once all the clamps are in place, I can tighten them down securely, putting as much pressure on them as I can. I'll tighten them down going from one end to the other, but by the time I'm at the other end, I have to go back and tighten them some more. When I can see glue squishing out of the ends, I know that they have been clamped very well. After several hours, the glue has set up and I can remove the clamps. Now I have 3 laminated boards that are 3 feet long, 6 inches wide, being made of solid hardwood. There's not going to be any flex in this wood. I've run these boards over the joiner and ripped them down to an even width, and now it's time to cut them to size. I start by squaring off one end. I have to cut these boards at 2 different sizes in order to accommodate the size of the capos. So here I take the first measurement and cut off the first board. There's no need to measure the second board, so I just square off the other side. I'm going to end up with 3 boards that are approximately 19 inches long and 3 boards that are approximately 15 inches long. These will accommodate a certain number of capos. For each board, I have to find and mark the exact center. I place them in the laser engraver with the cutter head right on the center point. In order to put them on the center point, I send one little pulse to see where the laser beam lands. Then I can make slight adjustments to make sure that the beam falls right on the center point. I set the laser cutter at maximum power so that it'll cut deep into the wood. This is the CAD design that I've laid out for this length of board. Once everything is in place and I have it set to the right settings, I can start the cutting process. The laser is not powerful enough to cut all the way through, but I have a remedy for that. Once the process is complete, I will flip the board over on the other side and place it on exactly the same center point. I'll send one laser pulse just to make sure it's dead on center. At this point, using the software controls, I can take the image and flip it over the other way, just like I flipped the board, making a mirror image on the other side. Now I'm able to send the starting command to the cutter. If the board has been positioned correctly, this will allow the laser beam to have cut all the way through the board, going over halfway from one side and the other half from the other side. Cutting takes about 15 minutes on each side for this laser machine. For the final laser procedure, I open the image that has the logo text written on it. This will etch the letters on somewhat like an inkjet printer. So the laser cutter has effectively cut on both sides of the wood, halfway through one side and halfway through the other side. Now it's time to break all the individual pieces out of the board. These pieces consist of the individual shapes of the capos, plus a block in the middle that I'm going to cut for a very vital part of the capo. So I'm using pretty much all the wood. And you can see how the laser has literally burnt right through the wood, leaving a lot of char on the edges. So I'm going to separate the basic shapes from the blocks. I would say that this belt and disc sander is probably the most used tool in my shop for this procedure. So I'm going to put on a new disc of sandpaper. It's going to be an 80 grit so we can clean up these pieces. And now begins the task of cleaning the charred edges of these pieces. The table surface is set perfectly squared to the sanding disc. For the ends, I've set the sliding miter gauge perfectly squared to the disc to make it vertically square. I'll grind off just enough of the char to make it disappear off the wood. I'll send all the capos through sanding at these 2 points in order to square them up for the next procedure. Once those 2 surfaces are all squared up, then I can continue sanding the other surfaces and rounding off the 2 corners. The surfaces on the concave areas are going to go through another procedure in order to get cleaned up. But for now, I'm going to use the remaining grit on the sanding disc to sand the rectangular blocks that I'm going to cut into smaller pieces. These are also going to be squared off. Sanding them cleans them up really nicely, see? That's yet to be done on the inside, but you can see how clean they get. So I got this miniature little table saw that does a wonderful job of cleaning up the inside surfaces on the ends of the capo. I set it up with a little makeshift fence and set the blade at the exact height that I need. This takes off all the unevenness and char that are on the inside surface there. Next, I'll reset the fence, and I have this little push jig so that I can cut all the little blocks. These pieces are extremely small, and I couldn't imagine cutting it on a large table saw. This mini table saw works very well, but I've been known to use the bandsaw on this also. These are the little blocks that go right here. It pushes it open and shut. Now the last surface to be sanded is the top of the inside, and for this I set up a little jig on the sander and run them through. So now you can see that these capos have been sanded on all surfaces, and they look a lot cleaner than when they came off the laser cutter. Next, I set up a 7mm Forstner bit on a small drill press with a jig. These holes are going to carry the threaded insert for the capo, so they have to be fairly precise. This procedure gives the greatest test to the strength of the wood, and I usually lose a few of them in the process because the glue joint wasn't strong enough. While I'm still at the drill press, I set up a micro bit and drill a hole in the very center of these blocks. This is where the fastener is going to go that holds the block onto the capo. I need to put the hole in the very center of these blocks, so it's a pretty precise drilling operation. And with each block being slightly different, I have to do it by eye. So now we're back to the laser cutter, where I have to put a slot on the surface of the capo to take the fastener. After setting up the jig to put the slot perfectly in the center, I do each one individually. This is the only tool I can think of that puts a slot in the wood with perfectly square ends. All the cleaning and milling is complete, and now it's time to put a 220 grit sanding belt on the belt sander for the final finish sanding. So I basically have to sand every outside surface of the capo that's going to be seen, as well as the rounded corners. In order to clean these sanding belts, I use a piece of crepe rubber, which is pretty standard for cleaning sanding belts, and it pretty much cleans them. After taking compressed air and blowing off all the fine sawdust particles, I'm ready to set them up to put some finish on them. I set them up in a specific configuration in order to finish them all at one time. Once the capo bodies are set up, I put down all the little blocks because I'm going to put finish on them also. So I make a pass going in each direction, north, south, east, west. This effectively puts 4 coats of varnish on each side. Once the varnish is dried, I take each piece and flip it over. I make 4 passes, one going in each direction. It effectively puts 4 coats of varnish on the pieces. Once the varnishing is complete, I gather them all up to take inside for the final assembly. Each capo gets a piece of rubber padding that pushes the strings down. I use 50 Duran neoprene with an adhesive back, and I use the laser cutter to cut the shapes initially. The neoprene is so resilient that I have to use a very high setting to cut most of the way through, and it leaves a lot of black smoke, so I shut the lid. After the lasering is complete, I take a little solvent on a rag and clean off all the excess soot. There are 2 surfaces of the capo that I use cork on for padding. I use a very thin adhesive cork. I can line up to 15 capos in a row and cut them all at once. Using a razor knife, I can make clean cuts and they look really good. This cork padding featured on my capos is extremely necessary for keeping scuffs and scratches off of the instrument's fingerboard. The other surface that gets cork is the blocks, of course. So I line up all the blocks and cut them. For the threaded inserts, I put a dab of glue on each insert and very carefully press it into the hole that I made in the capo. This little eyelet will hold the thumb screw in place. I then proceed to make the final cuts in the neoprene rubber because the laser cutter was set to not cut all the way through. It's basically to mark them, and then I cut them by hand. The neoprene comes backed with a strong adhesive. This is the rubber part that will come in contact with the strings of the dulcimer, compressing them against the fret. And now for the most important piece of hardware, certainly the most expensive. A solid brass knurled thumb screw is inserted into the eyelets. At the same time, I insert a brass pin into the slot, which will hold the little block in place so that it will slide to fit the width of the fingerboard. At the time of filming this, I was using brass escutcheon pins for this. Since then, I have upgraded the design to have a tiny screw and a washer. This allows the player to be able to adjust the block so it will slide in place when fitted into the fingerboard of the dulcimer. The wooden block is secured to the pins or the screws either way with some glue to hold them fast. At this point, the dulcimer capos are essentially complete. They just need to be packaged and marketed to all the fine musicians who use them. Besides offering them direct from my shop through various selling platforms, I also box them in bulk to be repackaged and distributed by a few shops anywhere around the world where you find dulcimer players. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Let me know if you did. Until we meet again, happy trails.